Okay, we're going to look at the size and shape of the field that generates these superstorms. But before we do so, it's important to note that these took place virtually every day and night from late April until almost mid-July. And then just as suddenly, they've just stopped. So it's been almost a month and there hasn't been a single one, even though, as you can see, the awesome accuracy of placement has gone with great consistency. So, and the other thing is that many people around the country noticed a big fall off of those super trails and a lot of more blue sky, which is true here in the Washington, D.C. area, where there were only 4 super trails truncated over a period of almost a month. Now they've returned, so the reasons for that are worthy of consideration, but we'll have to look at that another day. They can't just cut them off in case somebody discovered it, because then it would be total proof that they're not natural. So they've got to be around to some extent. But as it is, these superstorms have been taking place in this fashion, and we return to the fact that Noah spent millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to understand them, and they were unable to. This despite meteorology that goes all the way back to the ancients and Aristotle, who was the father, all the way through to give us our modern picture of what weather does, and now augmented with the supercomputers, which really do most of the predicting for our so-called meteorologists. These supercomputers are allowing us to create a very detailed picture of what happens for the most part in the atmosphere. And of course we have satellite views, but this just returns us to Noah's problem. Despite all this, they couldn't explain these superstorms. As it is, you and I have the basics of what causes weather, which we've seen since we were kids. The sun, convection, clouds, highs, lows, those basics. But the most important element is that the atmosphere is like a fluid, and it's entirely comprised of random fluid dynamics. So if we see highly regular mathematical forms, those are worthy of study because it tends to violate that fluid random element. So we're going to look at this particular day in which we see 2 separate systems connect across a huge gap of many hundreds of miles, and they connect in a most peculiar and at least visually unnatural fashion. This is what we're going to look at. So as you see, that extension there from on the right is moving at an angle to the original movement and is what's going to be connecting the huge storm on the right with the one on the left. The most important element is, and we've looked at this before, but is these straight lines with highly regular nodes on which, or in which, from which are generated very powerful, energized events that turn into the superstorm itself. When we connect all of the lines and we see this highly regular form there, we see that it's a highly regular grid at right angles to each other, and this is consistent throughout the entire formation. Post sunset, it's driving right across, and again, in case you doubt me, there's your sunset before that thing even launches across. This is entirely consistent with the formations of these superstorms, so that's why it's worthwhile looking at this. It's not a one-time deal, but we have a lot of good detail on it. So here you see near it another set. See the 4 right there? Those are trying to ignite and will ignite. You can actually see it gaining water mass as it's blue even before it actually gets going. But the green is where the most water vapor is concentrated. Without the convection of the sun, we have a big problem. So they connect. Now again, they don't connect on a straight line, but they connect on parallel lines. That point node stays in place. It forms and then it just stays there regardless of the movement of the wind. And its ability to exist at all under a huge cloud mass is highly unnatural intuitively. Very straight line. It's like a wooden stake. And this now shows us the general size of at least the focused area of this grid where the most interference is having effect. It's probably affecting on the southernmost portion, but it's not strong enough, and that tends to go away. But this doesn't go away. It just keeps growing and growing and growing because that's where the field is, and it remains in effect. Here we see in infrared, as the sun sets, it gets brighter for infrared, and but you can see the nodes, and again the development along it, quite dramatic. And then, like a motorboat, you know, the nodes just stay in place. Growing in power. And here's the cloud mass overhead. Even though the sun set, it wouldn't make any difference. It's developing under it by some energy that is equal to the midday sun. Later, post-midnight, it's remained basically focused in that area and is growing like a monster, as it did virtually every day and night from late April until almost mid-July. But this has been going on consistently since 2012. That's why it's worthy of study. The air that is from which is generated these superstorms is coming from the west, but the prediction was that wet air is going to come from the Gulf, which is down there at the right corner, and will cause it. Well, that's completely inaccurate. That leads us to the question, how can they make a prediction about what they don't understand using a model where the water vapor is completely inaccurate? We'll get to that another day. 2:20 a.m. is typical, still growing.